Question 1. Market research demonstrates a significant upward trend in demand for Performance Food Group's core product lines within a newly identified demographic. When considering how to communicate this finding externally, which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory compliance and ethical disclosure practices for a publicly traded company? Option A. Immediately issue a press release highlighting the positive market research findings and projecting significant future growth based on this trend. Option B. Conduct a thorough internal review of the market research data. Consult with legal and finance departments to assess its implications for financial reporting and investor communications, and then issue a carefully worded statement that contextualizes the findings. Option C. Share the raw market research data directly with key investors and analysts to allow them to draw their own conclusions. Option D. Publicly announce the market research findings without any internal review, emphasizing the most optimistic interpretations to generate positive market sentiment. The correct answer is A. Immediately issue a press release highlighting the positive market research findings and projecting significant future growth based on this trend. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Performance Food Group, as a publicly traded company, operates under strict regulatory oversight, particularly concerning financial reporting and investor communications. The need to accurately reflect market research findings in public statements requires a careful balance between transparency and avoiding misleading information, which could have significant legal and reputational consequences. Judgment is required to ensure that any claims made are substantiated and do not create undue optimism or pessimism among investors. The correct approach involves a thorough internal review process that validates the market research data and ensures its interpretation aligns with Performance Food Group's financial reporting obligations and disclosure requirements. This approach is ethically sound and regulatorily compliant because it prioritizes accuracy and avoids making unsubstantiated claims. By seeking internal validation and ensuring alignment with disclosure policies, Performance Food Group upholds its commitment to providing truthful and reliable information to the market, thereby protecting investors and maintaining its integrity. This aligns with general principles of fair disclosure and avoiding material misstatements, which are fundamental to securities regulations. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the positive aspects of the market research without rigorous internal validation risks misrepresenting the company's outlook. This could lead to accusations of misleading investors, potentially violating securities laws that mandate accurate and complete disclosure of material information. Another incorrect approach that involves immediately releasing the research findings without any internal review or context fails to consider the potential impact on investor perception and the company's financial reporting. This haste can lead to premature or inaccurate statements that are not properly vetted, creating a risk of market manipulation or insider trading concerns if not handled with appropriate disclosure protocols. A further incorrect approach that involves downplaying or ignoring potentially negative implications within the research, even if the overall sentiment is positive, also constitutes a failure in transparency and could be seen as an attempt to manipulate market perception. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the source and reliability of the information. This should be followed by an internal assessment to determine the materiality and implications of the findings, considering potential impacts on financial performance and investor relations. Crucially, any public communication based on such research must be reviewed by legal and compliance departments to ensure adherence to all relevant regulatory requirements and internal disclosure policies. Question 2. Investigation of a new product line introduction at Performance Food Group reveals a potential need to alter existing ingredient sourcing and labeling. What is the most appropriate approach to ensure compliance with all applicable food safety and labeling regulations? Option A. Rely on informal assurances from new ingredient suppliers regarding their compliance with food safety standards and accept their proposed labeling as adequate without independent verification. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment of the proposed changes against all relevant food safety and labeling laws, engaging regulatory experts to review the revised sourcing and labeling plans before implementation. Option C. Focus on achieving cost efficiencies in ingredient sourcing and production, with the understanding that regulatory compliance will be addressed reactively if any concerns are raised by regulatory bodies. Option D. Prioritize the speed to market for the new product line, assuming that existing supplier certifications are sufficient and that minor labeling adjustments can be made post-launch if issues arise. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment of the proposed changes against all relevant food safety and labeling laws, engaging regulatory experts to review the revised sourcing and labeling plans before implementation. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires Performance Food Group to navigate potential conflicts between business objectives and regulatory compliance, specifically concerning food safety and labeling. A misstep could lead to significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and most importantly, harm to consumers. Careful judgment is required to balance the need for efficient product rollout with the absolute necessity of adhering to all applicable regulations. The correct approach involves a thorough and proactive impact assessment that prioritizes regulatory compliance and consumer safety above all else. This means meticulously reviewing the proposed changes against all relevant food safety laws and labeling requirements before implementation. This approach is right because it embodies the principle of compliance by design, ensuring that regulatory considerations are integrated into the decision-making process from the outset. Specifically, it aligns with the fundamental tenets of food safety regulations, which mandate that all food products are safe for consumption and accurately labeled to inform consumers. This proactive stance minimizes the risk of non-compliance and demonstrates a commitment to ethical business practices and consumer well-being. An approach that prioritizes speed to market without a comprehensive regulatory review is ethically and regulatorily unsound. This failure stems from a disregard for the potential risks associated with non-compliance, which could include selling misbranded or adulterated products, violating consumer protection laws, and potentially endangering public health. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on cost savings without adequately assessing regulatory implications, also represents a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This demonstrates a prioritization of financial gain over consumer safety and legal obligations, which is unacceptable under any regulatory framework governing food production and distribution. A third incorrect approach, relying on informal assurances from suppliers without independent verification, is also problematic. This approach outsources critical compliance responsibilities without due diligence, leaving Performance Food Group vulnerable to regulatory action if the supplier's assurances prove inaccurate. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with identifying all relevant regulatory requirements. This should be followed by a comprehensive risk assessment, evaluating the potential impact of any proposed change on compliance and consumer safety. The next step involves developing mitigation strategies to address identified risks, prioritizing those that ensure full regulatory adherence. Finally, ongoing monitoring and review mechanisms should be established to ensure continued compliance throughout the product lifecycle. Question 3. The evaluation methodology shows that Performance Food Group is considering significant operational restructuring. Which approach to assessing the potential impacts of this restructuring best aligns with responsible corporate practice and regulatory expectations for a company of its scale? Option A. Prioritize the financial returns to shareholders above all other considerations, with minimal regard for potential disruptions to the workforce or community. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that evaluates effects on employees, supply chain partners, and the broader economic environment, developing mitigation strategies for adverse outcomes. Option C. Implement the restructuring first and then address any negative consequences that arise, such as employee grievances or community backlash, on a case-by-case basis. Option D. Focus exclusively on identifying opportunities for immediate cost reduction and efficiency gains, assuming that shareholder benefits will naturally cascade to other stakeholders. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that evaluates effects on employees, supply chain partners, and the broader economic environment, developing mitigation strategies for adverse outcomes. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires Performance Food Group to balance the immediate need for operational efficiency with the long-term implications of its strategic decisions on its workforce and the broader economic landscape. The company must consider not only its own financial performance, but also its responsibilities as a significant employer and contributor to the supply chain. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any impact assessment is comprehensive, objective, and considers a wide range of stakeholders and potential consequences, aligning with both regulatory expectations and ethical business practices. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves conducting a thorough and multifaceted impact assessment. This means systematically evaluating the potential effects of the proposed operational changes on various aspects, including employee roles, job security, training needs, and the company's overall contribution to the local and national economy. This approach is right because it aligns with the principles of responsible corporate citizenship and proactive risk management. Regulatory frameworks often encourage or mandate such assessments to ensure that business decisions do not lead to undue hardship for employees or communities, and to identify potential mitigation strategies. Ethically, it demonstrates a commitment to transparency and fairness towards employees and stakeholders. Incorrect approaches analysis, focusing solely on immediate cost savings without considering the broader implications for employees and the supply chain, is an incorrect approach. This failure neglects the potential for negative impacts such as increased employee turnover, decreased morale, and disruption to operational continuity, which can ultimately outweigh short-term financial gains. It also risks violating ethical obligations to employees and potentially contravening labor laws or regulations that protect workers' rights and require fair treatment during organizational changes. Prioritizing the perceived benefits to shareholders above all other considerations, without a balanced assessment of other stakeholder impacts, is also an incorrect approach. This narrow focus can lead to decisions that are detrimental to employee well-being, community relations, and the company's long-term reputation. It fails to acknowledge the interconnectedness of business success with the welfare of its employees and the communities it serves, and may overlook regulatory requirements related to stakeholder engagement or fair labor practices. Adopting a reactive approach, addressing negative consequences only after they arise rather than proactively assessing and mitigating them, is another incorrect approach. This reactive stance can lead to significant reputational damage, legal liabilities, and a loss of trust among employees and the public. It demonstrates a lack of foresight and responsible management, failing to meet the standards of due diligence expected of a company like Performance Food Group. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Performance Food Group should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear definition of the objectives of the impact assessment. This should be followed by the identification of all relevant stakeholders and potential impact areas. Data collection should be comprehensive, drawing from internal metrics, industry benchmarks, and expert analysis. The assessment should then systematically analyze potential positive and negative impacts, quantifying where possible and qualitatively describing others. Crucially, the framework must include the development of mitigation strategies for negative impacts and contingency plans. Finally, the findings and proposed actions should be communicated transparently to relevant stakeholders, ensuring accountability and continuous review. Question 4. Market research demonstrates a potential strategic partnership opportunity with a new supplier that offers significant cost reductions on a key product line for Performance Food Group. However, this supplier is also a direct competitor to several of Performance Food Group's existing, long-standing suppliers. What is the most professionally responsible approach for Performance Food Group to evaluate this opportunity? Option A. Immediately accept the new supplier's offer to capitalize on the cost savings, as this directly benefits Performance Food Group's bottom line. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment evaluating the potential benefits and risks to Performance Food Group, its customers, and its existing supplier relationships, while also considering market competition and long-term strategic alignment. Option C. Prioritize the existing supplier relationships and decline the new partnership to avoid disrupting current business dynamics. Option D. Proceed with the partnership based on the new supplier's assurances of quality and reliability, without extensive further investigation into broader market implications. Correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment evaluating the potential benefits and risks to Performance Food Group, its customers, and its existing supplier relationships, while also considering market competition and long-term strategic alignment. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Performance Food Group due to the potential for conflicts of interest and the need to maintain fair and transparent business practices. The core of the challenge lies in balancing the company's legitimate business interests with the ethical obligations to its stakeholders, including customers, suppliers, and employees. Careful judgment is required to ensure that decisions are made impartially and do not unfairly benefit certain parties at the expense of others. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective assessment of the proposed partnership's impact on all relevant stakeholders, considering potential market distortions, competitive disadvantages for other suppliers, and the overall benefit to Performance Food Group's customers. This approach aligns with principles of fair competition and ethical business conduct, which are implicitly or explicitly governed by general business ethics and potentially antitrust regulations if the market share implications are significant. It prioritizes long-term sustainability and reputation over short-term gains. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the immediate cost savings for Performance Food Group fails to consider the broader implications. This could lead to accusations of unfair dealing or anti-competitive behavior, potentially damaging relationships with other suppliers and impacting market dynamics. Such a narrow focus disregards the ethical responsibility to maintain a level playing field and could violate principles of good corporate citizenship. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes the supplier's existing relationship without a comprehensive impact assessment risks overlooking potential negative consequences for Performance Food Group and its customers. This could result in a suboptimal partnership that does not truly serve the company's best interests or could create an appearance of favoritism, undermining trust and transparency. A third incorrect approach that involves immediate acceptance without due diligence ignores the fundamental requirement for prudent business decision-making. This could expose Performance Food Group to unforeseen risks, such as contractual disputes, quality issues, or reputational damage, all of which could have been mitigated through a proper assessment process. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying potential conflicts of interest and ethical considerations. This is followed by gathering comprehensive information from all relevant perspectives, analyzing the potential impacts on all stakeholders, and evaluating the proposed action against established ethical guidelines and relevant business principles. Finally, a decision should be made that demonstrably serves the best interests of the company and its stakeholders in a fair and transparent manner. Question 5. When evaluating a potential new supplier for Performance Food Group that has experienced significant operational disruptions, what is the most appropriate approach to assessing the impact of this supplier's situation on Performance Food Group's financial reporting and operational continuity, adhering strictly to U.S. securities regulations and accounting principles? Option A. Rely solely on the supplier's assurances of recovery and postpone any internal assessment until the disruptions are fully resolved to avoid premature or inaccurate reporting. Option B. Focus exclusively on the immediate cost savings offered by the supplier, assuming that any operational issues will be resolved independently by the supplier without impacting Performance Food Group's financial statements. Option C. Immediately disclose the potential disruption to investors, regardless of its materiality, to ensure full transparency and avoid any perception of selective disclosure. Option D. Conduct a detailed qualitative assessment of the supplier's operational stability and potential impact on Performance Food Group's supply chain, consulting with legal counsel to understand disclosure obligations under Regulation FD and SEC guidance. Correct answer is D. Conduct a detailed qualitative assessment of the supplier's operational stability and potential impact on Performance Food Group's supply chain, consulting with legal counsel to understand disclosure obligations under Regulation FD and SEC guidance. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Performance Food Group, as a publicly traded company, operates under strict regulatory oversight. Decisions regarding the disclosure of material information can have significant financial and legal ramifications. The core challenge lies in balancing the need for timely and accurate information dissemination with the potential for market manipulation or unfair advantage. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with securities laws and to maintain investor confidence. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective assessment of the information's materiality and the potential impact on Performance Food Group's stock price. This includes consulting with legal counsel and investor relations professionals to ensure all disclosures are accurate, complete, and made in accordance with SEC regulations, particularly Regulation FD, fair disclosure. This approach upholds the ethical duty to treat all investors fairly and prevents selective disclosure, which is a violation of securities laws. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the immediate financial benefit without considering regulatory implications fails to acknowledge the legal framework governing public companies. This could lead to accusations of insider trading or selective disclosure, resulting in severe penalties for both the company and individuals involved. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over accuracy risks disseminating incomplete or misleading information. This can erode investor trust and lead to market volatility, potentially triggering investigations by regulatory bodies. A further incorrect approach that involves withholding information indefinitely, even if it is material, can also be problematic. While it might prevent short-term market fluctuations, it can violate disclosure obligations and create an information asymmetry that is detrimental to fair market operations. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes compliance, accuracy, and fairness. This involves establishing clear internal policies for information handling and disclosure, conducting regular training for employees on these policies, and creating a culture where ethical considerations and regulatory adherence are paramount. When faced with a disclosure decision, the process should involve a multidisciplinary team, including legal, finance, and investor relations, to ensure all angles are considered and that the final decision aligns with both legal requirements and ethical best practices. Question 6. Market research demonstrates a growing trend in the food distribution industry toward strategic alliances between distributors and technology providers to enhance supply chain efficiency. Performance Food Group is considering a partnership with a new software company that offers innovative inventory management solutions. This software company is also in discussions with several of Performance Food Group's direct competitors. What is the most appropriate approach for Performance Food Group to take when evaluating this potential partnership? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment, including an analysis of potential conflicts of interest, competitive implications, and the long-term strategic fit for Performance Food Group, documenting all findings and decisions. Option B. Rely on informal discussions with the software company's executives to gauge their commitment and ensure they will not prioritize competitors. Option C. Proceed with the partnership based on the perceived technological advantage, assuming competitors will also pursue similar solutions independently. Option D. Immediately enter into a preliminary agreement to secure the technology before competitors finalize their own deals. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment, including an analysis of potential conflicts of interest, competitive implications, and the long-term strategic fit for Performance Food Group, documenting all findings and decisions. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Performance Food Group due to the potential for conflicts of interest and the need to maintain fair and transparent business practices. The core of the challenge lies in balancing legitimate business relationships with the imperative to avoid any perception or reality of undue influence or preferential treatment. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all decisions are made in the best interest of Performance Food Group and its stakeholders, adhering strictly to ethical standards and relevant regulations. The correct approach involves a thorough and documented assessment of the potential impact of the proposed partnership on Performance Food Group's existing supplier relationships and market position. This includes identifying any potential conflicts of interest, evaluating the competitive landscape, and considering the long-term strategic alignment. By proactively identifying and mitigating risks, Performance Food Group can make an informed decision that upholds its integrity and complies with regulatory expectations regarding fair competition and business conduct. This approach aligns with ethical principles of transparency, fairness, and fiduciary duty to the company. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the partnership without a comprehensive impact assessment. This could lead to regulatory scrutiny, damage to existing supplier relationships, and potential accusations of unfair competition. Failing to identify conflicts of interest or to consider the broader market implications could result in decisions that are not in the best interest of Performance Food Group, potentially violating ethical obligations to shareholders and customers. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on informal discussions or personal assurances from the potential partner, as this lacks the necessary documentation and objective analysis required for sound business decision-making and regulatory compliance. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core issue and its potential implications. This should be followed by gathering relevant information, assessing risks and benefits, consulting with appropriate internal stakeholders, e.g., legal, compliance, procurement, and documenting the decision-making process and rationale. Adherence to company policies, ethical guidelines, and applicable regulations should be paramount throughout the process. Question 7. Analysis of a new sales agreement at Performance Food Group reveals a complex arrangement with a significant customer that includes unusual payment terms and potential future rebates contingent on performance metrics. The sales team is eager to book the revenue immediately, citing the signed contract. As a member of the accounting department, what is the most appropriate approach to ensure compliance with financial reporting regulations and internal policies? Option A. Conduct a thorough review of the transaction against Performance Food Group's established accounting policies and relevant U.S. generally accepted accounting principles, GAAP, to determine the appropriate revenue recognition timing and amount. Option B. Delay recording the transaction until all potential customer concerns and future performance metrics are fully resolved, regardless of the contract's current status. Option C. Record the transaction as a provisional entry and address any discrepancies or adjustments at a later date once the situation becomes clearer. Option D. Immediately book the revenue as per the sales team's request, assuming the signed contract is sufficient justification. The correct answer is D. Immediately book the revenue as per the sales team's request, assuming the signed contract is sufficient justification. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Performance Food Group, as a publicly traded company, operates under stringent regulatory oversight, particularly concerning financial reporting and disclosure. Employees are expected to uphold the integrity of financial information and adhere to established accounting principles and company policies. The challenge lies in navigating potential conflicts between business pressures and the absolute requirement for accurate and transparent financial reporting, ensuring that all financial activities are properly documented and comply with relevant regulations. The correct approach involves a thorough and documented review of the transaction against Performance Food Group's established accounting policies and relevant U.S. generally accepted accounting principles, GAAP. This ensures that the transaction is recorded accurately, consistently, and in compliance with all applicable financial reporting standards. This approach is professionally sound because it prioritizes accuracy, transparency, and regulatory compliance, which are fundamental ethical and legal obligations for any employee involved in financial matters at a public company. Adhering to GAAP and internal policies prevents misstatements, ensures reliable financial reporting, and mitigates the risk of regulatory scrutiny or penalties. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with recording the transaction based solely on the sales team's assurance without independent verification. This fails to uphold the professional responsibility to ensure the accuracy of financial data. It bypasses necessary internal controls and could lead to misstated financial results, violating GAAP and potentially securities laws. Another incorrect approach would be to delay recording the transaction indefinitely until all potential customer concerns are resolved, even if the transaction meets the criteria for revenue recognition. This could lead to inaccurate timing of revenue recognition, misrepresenting the company's financial performance in the current period, and violating the principle of matching revenues with expenses. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to record the transaction as a provisional entry without a clear plan for finalization or adjustment. This creates ambiguity in the financial records, does not adhere to the principles of clear and auditable accounting, and could lead to confusion and potential misinterpretation of the company's financial position. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to accounting standards, internal policies, and ethical conduct. This involves seeking clarification when unsure, performing due diligence, documenting all decisions and justifications, and escalating issues to appropriate management or compliance personnel when necessary. The goal is always to ensure the integrity and accuracy of financial information. Question 8. Market research demonstrates that Performance Food Group is exploring opportunities to diversify its supplier base for key ingredients. A senior executive at Performance Food Group has a personal acquaintance who is launching a new food ingredient company and has strongly recommended that Performance Food Group immediately engage with this new entity for a significant portion of its supply needs. What is the most professionally responsible approach for Performance Food Group to take in this situation? Option A. Agree to a trial period with the new supplier with minimal vetting, relying primarily on the senior executive's assurance of the company's quality and reliability. Option B. Immediately award a substantial contract to the new supplier based on the senior executive's recommendation to foster a new business relationship and leverage the executive's influence. Option C. Decline to engage with the new supplier to avoid any potential disruption to established and reliable existing supplier partnerships. Option D. Initiate a formal, objective evaluation process for the new supplier, assessing their capabilities, quality control, pricing, and potential impact on existing supply chain relationships, while ensuring compliance with all relevant procurement policies and ethical guidelines. The correct answer is D. Initiate a formal, objective evaluation process for the new supplier, assessing their capabilities, quality control, pricing, and potential impact on existing supply chain relationships, while ensuring compliance with all relevant procurement policies and ethical guidelines. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Performance Food Group due to the potential for conflicts of interest and the need to maintain fair and transparent business practices. The core of the challenge lies in balancing the company's legitimate business interests with the ethical obligations to its suppliers and the broader market. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any new supplier relationship does not unfairly disadvantage existing partners or create an uneven playing field. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective assessment of the new supplier's capabilities and potential impact on Performance Food Group's operations and existing supplier relationships. This approach prioritizes due diligence, fairness, and compliance with industry best practices and any applicable regulations governing procurement and supplier diversity. It ensures that decisions are based on merit and strategic benefit, rather than personal connections or undue influence, thereby upholding ethical standards and fostering long-term, sustainable business relationships. An incorrect approach that involves prioritizing a new supplier based on a personal relationship with a key executive without a comprehensive evaluation fails to meet professional standards. This could lead to decisions that are not in the best interest of Performance Food Group, potentially resulting in suboptimal pricing, quality issues, or supply chain disruptions. Such an approach also raises serious ethical concerns regarding favoritism and could violate internal company policies on procurement and conflicts of interest. Another incorrect approach, which involves immediately rejecting the new supplier without proper investigation due to concerns about disrupting existing relationships, is also professionally unsound. While maintaining strong existing partnerships is important, a blanket refusal to consider new opportunities based solely on potential disruption stifles innovation and can lead to missed opportunities for cost savings or improved service. This approach lacks the strategic foresight necessary for effective supply chain management and could result in Performance Food Group falling behind competitors. A further incorrect approach, such as agreeing to terms with the new supplier based on the executive's recommendation without verifying the supplier's capacity or compliance, exposes Performance Food Group to significant risks. This could include contractual breaches, reputational damage, or even legal liabilities if the supplier fails to meet required standards or engage in unethical practices. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the company's fiduciary responsibilities. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured evaluation framework. This framework should include 1. Identifying the business need or opportunity. 2. Establishing clear, objective criteria for evaluating potential suppliers. 3. Conducting thorough due diligence on all prospective partners, including financial stability, operational capacity, quality control, and ethical compliance. 4. Assessing the potential impact on existing relationships and the overall supply chain strategy. 5. Documenting the evaluation process and the rationale for any decision. 6. Ensuring that all decisions align with company policies, ethical guidelines, and relevant regulations. Question 9. Operational review demonstrates that a recent shipment of perishable goods at a Performance Food Group distribution center experienced a temporary temperature excursion during transit due to a refrigeration unit malfunction. While the temperature returned to acceptable levels before arrival, there is a concern about the potential impact on product quality and safety. Which of the following actions best aligns with regulatory requirements and professional food safety standards for Performance Food Group? Option A. Attempt to recondition or repackage the affected product to mask any visible signs of spoilage before releasing it to customers. Option B. Segregate the affected shipment, conduct a thorough assessment of the product's condition and potential risks, and follow established protocols for disposition, which may include discarding the product if safety cannot be assured. Option C. Proceed with distribution, but include a disclaimer to customers about the potential temperature excursion, shifting the responsibility for assessing product safety to the end user. Option D. Immediately release the shipment for distribution to customers, assuming the temperature excursion was brief and the product is likely still safe. The correct answer is D. Immediately release the shipment for distribution to customers, assuming the temperature excursion was brief and the product is likely still safe. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Performance Food Group employees due to the inherent conflict between maintaining operational efficiency and adhering to strict food safety regulations. The pressure to meet delivery schedules can create an environment where shortcuts might be considered, but the paramount importance of public health and regulatory compliance necessitates a rigorous approach to food handling and storage. Careful judgment is required to balance business demands with the non-negotiable standards set by regulatory bodies. The correct approach involves prioritizing immediate corrective action and thorough documentation, even if it means temporary disruption to operations. This aligns with the core principles of food safety regulations, which mandate that any deviation from established standards that could compromise food safety must be addressed promptly and effectively. By isolating the affected product, conducting a thorough investigation, and implementing corrective measures, Performance Food Group demonstrates a commitment to preventing the distribution of potentially unsafe food. This proactive stance is crucial for maintaining consumer trust and avoiding severe regulatory penalties, including fines and reputational damage. The regulatory framework emphasizes a preventive, rather than reactive approach to food safety, making immediate and transparent action the only professionally sound choice. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the cost of discarding product or the impact on delivery schedules fails to recognize the severity of potential foodborne illness outbreaks and the legal ramifications. Such an approach would violate the fundamental duty to protect public health and would be in direct contravention of food safety laws that hold companies strictly liable for distributing contaminated or improperly handled food. Another incorrect approach that involves attempting to fix or recondition the product without proper assessment or authorization would also be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Food safety regulations often have specific guidelines for product disposition, and unauthorized attempts to alter product integrity can introduce new risks or mask existing ones, leading to further complications and potential legal action. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the regulatory requirements, a commitment to ethical conduct, and a structured approach to problem solving. When faced with a potential food safety issue, professionals should 1. Immediately assess the risk to public health. 2. Consult relevant internal policies and external regulations. 3. Isolate and secure the affected product. 4. Initiate a thorough investigation to determine the root cause. 5. Implement appropriate corrective and preventive actions. 6. Document all steps taken meticulously. 7. Communicate transparently with relevant stakeholders, including regulatory bodies if necessary. This systematic process ensures that decisions are grounded in safety, compliance, and accountability. Question 10. Research into Performance Food Group's vendor relationship policies reveals a situation where a key supplier, during a routine business meeting, offers to cover the cost of a significant entertainment event for the Performance Food Group team involved in procurement decisions. This offer is presented as a gesture of goodwill and partnership. What is the most appropriate and ethically compliant course of action for the Performance Food Group employee? Option A. Suggest a reciprocal gesture from Performance Food Group to the vendor to balance the perceived value of the entertainment. Option B. Accept the offer, as it is a common practice in the industry and a valuable opportunity to strengthen the vendor relationship, with the understanding that it will not influence future decisions. Option C. Accept the offer but ensure that the cost is reported internally as a business expense to maintain transparency. Option D. Politely decline the offer, citing Performance Food Group's strict policy against accepting gifts or entertainment of significant value from vendors, and reaffirming the company's commitment to conducting business based on merit. The correct answer is D. Politely decline the offer, citing Performance Food Group's strict policy against accepting gifts or entertainment of significant value from vendors, and reaffirming the company's commitment to conducting business based on merit. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Performance Food Group employee due to the inherent conflict between maintaining business relationships and adhering to ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. The core difficulty lies in balancing the desire to secure future business with the obligation to avoid improper inducements or preferential treatment that could compromise fair competition and regulatory integrity. Careful judgment is required to navigate these pressures without violating established guidelines. The correct approach involves a direct and transparent communication of Performance Food Group's policy regarding gifts and entertainment, emphasizing adherence to ethical standards and regulatory frameworks. This approach is professionally sound because it upholds the company's commitment to integrity and compliance. Specifically, it aligns with general principles of business ethics and within the U.S. regulatory context relevant to Performance Food Group, would likely be guided by internal company policies that mirror regulations such as the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, FCPA, if international dealings were involved, or state-specific anti-bribery and corruption laws. The focus is on maintaining a professional distance that prevents even the appearance of impropriety, ensuring that business decisions are based on merit and value, not on personal favors. An incorrect approach would be to accept the offer, even if it seems minor, as this creates a precedent and opens the door to further requests or the perception of undue influence. This failure is regulatory and ethical because it could be construed as an attempt to improperly influence business decisions, potentially violating anti-bribery laws and company codes of conduct. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the offer or avoid the vendor without explanation. This is professionally unsound as it can damage business relationships unnecessarily and does not proactively address the ethical dilemma, potentially leaving the door open for misunderstandings or future inappropriate offers. A third incorrect approach would be to accept the offer but attempt to conceal it. This is a severe ethical and regulatory failure, as it involves dishonesty and a deliberate attempt to circumvent established policies and potentially laws, leading to significant reputational and legal risks for both the individual and Performance Food Group. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Identifying the potential ethical or regulatory conflict. 2. Consulting company policies and relevant regulations. 3. Communicating clearly and professionally with all parties involved. 4. Documenting decisions and actions taken. 5. Seeking guidance from supervisors or compliance departments when in doubt. The goal is always to act with integrity, transparency, and in accordance with the highest professional standards. Question 11. The monitoring system demonstrates a pattern of activity within the Performance Food Group Logistics Department that deviates from the standard operating procedure for inventory reconciliation, specifically noting a higher than usual frequency of manual overrides. What is the most appropriate initial step for the compliance officer to take? Option A. Document the deviation and decide to monitor the situation further without immediate intervention, assuming it is a temporary fluctuation. Option B. Contact the logistics manager and the employees directly involved to understand the reasons for the manual overrides and review supporting documentation. Option C. Immediately initiate a formal disciplinary review for the employees involved in the manual overrides. Option D. Report the observed pattern to the executive leadership team as a potential significant compliance breach. The correct answer is C. Immediately initiate a formal disciplinary review for the employees involved in the manual overrides. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual at Performance Food Group to interpret and act upon data from a monitoring system that suggests a potential deviation from established compliance procedures. The challenge lies in discerning the true nature of the observed activity, whether it is a minor, explainable anomaly or a significant breach of regulatory requirements or internal policy. Careful judgment is required to avoid both overreaction and underreaction, which could have legal, financial, and reputational consequences for Performance Food Group. The correct approach involves a thorough, fact-based investigation that prioritizes gathering all relevant information before making a determination or taking action. This approach aligns with the principles of due diligence and responsible compliance management. Specifically, it requires seeking clarification from the involved parties and reviewing supporting documentation to understand the context of the monitoring system's alert. This is ethically sound and legally prudent, as it ensures that any subsequent actions are based on a complete understanding of the situation and are proportionate to the findings. This methodical process is essential for upholding Performance Food Group's commitment to regulatory adherence and ethical conduct. An incorrect approach that involves immediate disciplinary action without further investigation is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a lack of due diligence and a premature judgment, which could unfairly penalize an employee and expose Performance Food Group to legal challenges related to wrongful termination or disciplinary action. It bypasses the fundamental principle of affording individuals a fair process. Another incorrect approach, which is to ignore the alert due to its perceived minor nature, is also professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a disregard for established monitoring systems and potential compliance risks. It suggests a lax attitude towards regulatory adherence and internal controls, which could allow minor issues to escalate into significant problems, potentially leading to regulatory penalties or operational disruptions for Performance Food Group. A third incorrect approach, which is to escalate the issue to senior management without attempting to gather initial clarifying information, is inefficient and potentially disruptive. While escalation is sometimes necessary, doing so without a basic understanding of the situation can overwhelm senior leadership with unsubstantiated concerns and may indicate a lack of initiative or problem-solving skills on the part of the individual. The professional reasoning framework for similar situations involves a structured approach. First, acknowledge and understand the alert or observation. Second, gather all pertinent facts and context, including seeking explanations from those involved. Third, analyze the gathered information against relevant regulations, policies, and ethical standards. Fourth, determine the appropriate course of action, which may range from no action to further investigation, training, or disciplinary measures. Finally, document the entire process and the rationale for the decision. Question 12. Comparative studies suggest that employees in procurement roles at companies like Performance Food Group often face situations where suppliers offer gifts. If a supplier, with whom Performance Food Group has ongoing business dealings, offers a valuable gift to an individual employee involved in the supplier selection process, what is the most professionally responsible and ethically sound course of action for that employee to take? Option A. Accept the gift and then use it as leverage in future negotiations with the supplier to secure better terms for Performance Food Group. Option B. Accept the gift but keep it discreet and do not mention it to anyone within Performance Food Group to avoid unnecessary complications. Option C. Politely decline the gift, explaining that company policy prohibits accepting gifts that could influence business decisions and emphasizing the importance of maintaining objective vendor relationships. Option D. Accept the gift, as it is a common practice in business to acknowledge good working relationships and the supplier is a valued partner. The correct answer is C. Politely decline the gift, explaining that company policy prohibits accepting gifts that could influence business decisions and emphasizing the importance of maintaining objective vendor relationships. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Performance Food Group employee regarding the ethical and regulatory implications of accepting a gift from a supplier. The core difficulty lies in balancing the desire to maintain positive business relationships with the imperative to avoid even the appearance of impropriety or undue influence, which could compromise the integrity of procurement decisions. Careful judgment is required to discern between a token of appreciation and a gift that could be perceived as a bribe or inducement. The correct approach involves politely declining the gift, citing company policy, and the importance of maintaining objective business dealings. This aligns with standard ethical guidelines and regulatory frameworks that prohibit employees from accepting gifts that could influence their professional judgment or create a conflict of interest. Performance Food Group, like many companies operating under U.S. regulations, would have internal policies and likely adhere to broader ethical standards that emphasize transparency and fairness in all business transactions. Accepting a gift of significant value could violate these principles, potentially leading to internal disciplinary action and external regulatory scrutiny if it were to influence a procurement decision in favor of the supplier. An incorrect approach would be to accept the gift without question. This fails to acknowledge the potential for a conflict of interest and the appearance of impropriety. It disregards the ethical obligation to act in the best interest of Performance Food Group and could be interpreted as a violation of anti-bribery and corruption laws if the gift's value or context suggests an intent to influence business decisions. Another incorrect approach would be to accept the gift but not report it. This demonstrates a lack of transparency and a failure to adhere to internal reporting mechanisms designed to monitor and manage potential conflicts of interest. Such an omission could be seen as an attempt to conceal a potentially compromising situation, further eroding trust and potentially violating compliance policies. Accepting the gift and then attempting to justify it by claiming it was a small token without considering the supplier's intent or the company's policy also represents a failure in professional reasoning. The focus should be on adherence to policy and ethical standards, not on subjective justifications for potentially inappropriate actions. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of Performance Food Group's code of conduct and any relevant anti-corruption policies. When faced with a gift from a supplier, an employee should first assess its nature and value in light of these policies. If there is any doubt, or if the gift exceeds a nominal value, the safest and most ethical course of action is to politely decline. If declining is not feasible, or if the gift has already been accepted, it should be immediately reported to a supervisor or the compliance department for guidance. The guiding principle is to always prioritize the integrity of business dealings and avoid any situation that could compromise objectivity or create a conflict of interest. Question 13. The efficiency study reveals that a recent shipment of perishable goods for Performance Food Group experienced a temperature deviation exceeding the acceptable range for a significant portion of its transit time. Which of the following actions best aligns with regulatory requirements and best practices for ensuring food safety and maintaining compliance with relevant U.S. food safety laws? Option A. Attempt to recool the shipment to the correct temperature before delivery, assuming the deviation was temporary and unlikely to cause significant spoilage. Option B. Dispose of the shipment without notifying any external parties, assuming the risk of spoilage is too high to warrant further action. Option C. Proceed with the delivery of the shipment as scheduled, documenting the deviation internally but not reporting it externally unless a customer complaint is received. Option D. Immediately notify the receiving customer and the relevant U.S. Food and Drug Administration FDA district office about the temperature deviation, providing all relevant documentation, and await further instructions before proceeding with the delivery or disposal. The correct answer is D. Immediately notify the receiving customer and the relevant U.S. Food and Drug Administration FDA district office about the temperature deviation, providing all relevant documentation, and await further instructions before proceeding with the delivery or disposal. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Performance Food Group employees because it requires them to balance operational efficiency with adherence to specific regulatory frameworks governing food safety and distribution. The pressure to meet delivery targets can create a temptation to bypass established protocols, which could have severe consequences for public health and the company's reputation. Careful judgment is required to prioritize compliance over expediency. The correct approach involves a proactive and transparent communication strategy. This means immediately escalating the identified discrepancy to the appropriate internal stakeholders and regulatory bodies, as mandated by food safety regulations. This approach is correct because it aligns with the principles of due diligence and accountability inherent in food distribution. Specifically, it adheres to the requirements of the Food Safety Modernization Act, FSMA, in the U.S., which mandates that companies establish and implement preventive controls to address hazards that could cause illness or injury. By reporting the issue promptly, Performance Food Group demonstrates its commitment to consumer safety and regulatory compliance, mitigating potential risks and allowing for timely corrective actions. An incorrect approach would be to attempt to rectify the temperature deviation internally without proper documentation or notification. This fails to meet regulatory requirements for traceability and reporting of potential food safety hazards. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the deviation and proceed with the delivery, assuming it falls within an acceptable margin of error. This directly violates food safety standards and FSMA regulations, which require strict adherence to temperature controls for perishable goods. Such an action would expose consumers to potential harm and expose Performance Food Group to significant legal and financial penalties, including product recalls and loss of operating licenses. A third incorrect approach would be to only report the deviation after a customer complaint, rather than proactively. This demonstrates a reactive rather than a preventive approach to food safety, which is contrary to the spirit and letter of modern food safety legislation. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance and consumer safety. This involves understanding the relevant regulations, e.g., FSMA, identifying potential risks, and establishing clear protocols for reporting and addressing deviations. When faced with a discrepancy, the process should involve 1. Immediate identification and documentation of the issue. 2. Assessment of the potential risk based on established guidelines. 3. Prompt notification of relevant internal departments and external regulatory agencies. And 4. Implementation of corrective actions, as guided by regulatory requirements and internal policies. Question 14. Regulatory review indicates that a key supplier to Performance Food Group has offered a senior buyer a weekend trip to a popular resort, all expenses paid, as a token of appreciation for a recent successful contract negotiation. What is the most appropriate course of action for the Performance Food Group employee? Option A. Politely decline the offer, citing company policy on gifts and entertainment, and suggest a more modest, company-approved gesture if appropriate. Option B. Accept the offer and then discreetly inform the compliance department after the trip. Option C. Accept the offer as it is a gesture of appreciation from a valued supplier and unlikely to influence future business decisions. Option D. Accept the offer and consider it a personal benefit, as it was not directly tied to a specific future transaction. Correct answer is A. Politely decline the offer, citing company policy on gifts and entertainment, and suggest a more modest, company-approved gesture if appropriate. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an employee of Performance Food Group to navigate potential conflicts of interest and ensure compliance with internal policies and relevant regulations concerning gifts and entertainment. The core difficulty lies in discerning when a gesture of appreciation crosses the line from acceptable business practice to an unethical or illegal inducement that could compromise fair dealing. Careful judgment is required to uphold Performance Food Group's integrity and maintain trust with its business partners. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding and application of Performance Food Group's specific code of conduct and any applicable industry regulations that govern interactions with suppliers and customers. This approach prioritizes transparency, adherence to established thresholds for gift value, and seeking pre-approval for anything that might be perceived as exceeding normal business courtesies. This aligns with ethical business principles and regulatory expectations that demand integrity and prevent undue influence in commercial relationships. By documenting and seeking approval, the employee demonstrates a commitment to compliance and avoids any appearance of impropriety. An incorrect approach that involves accepting the offer without considering its value or potential implications is a failure to uphold Performance Food Group's ethical standards and could violate internal policies designed to prevent bribery or corruption. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the company's commitment to fair business practices. Another incorrect approach, which is to immediately refuse the gift without any consideration or context, might be overly cautious and could potentially damage a valuable business relationship unnecessarily. While avoiding conflict is important, a complete lack of engagement with the offer, without understanding its intent or value relative to company policy, is not a nuanced or professional response. A further incorrect approach, which is to accept the gift and then attempt to conceal it, represents a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This action directly undermines trust, suggests an intent to mislead, and is a clear violation of policies requiring transparency and accurate record-keeping. Such concealment can lead to severe consequences, including disciplinary action and reputational damage for both the individual and Performance Food Group. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding and internalizing company policies and relevant regulations. When faced with a situation involving gifts or entertainment, they should assess the nature, value, and context of the offer against these established guidelines. If there is any ambiguity, or if the offer approaches or exceeds defined limits, the professional should err on the side of caution by seeking guidance from their supervisor or the compliance department. Documentation and transparency are key to demonstrating ethical conduct and ensuring regulatory adherence. Question 15. Consider a scenario where a key supplier to Performance Food Group, with whom the company has a significant ongoing contract, offers a procurement manager a week-long, all-expenses-paid luxury vacation to a tropical resort. The supplier states this is a token of appreciation for the manager's excellent partnership and business acumen. The manager is aware that Performance Food Group has a policy regarding the acceptance of gifts and entertainment from suppliers, but is unsure of the exact threshold for what constitutes an unacceptable benefit. What is the most appropriate course of action for the Performance Food Group procurement manager in this situation? Option A. Accept the vacation, but offer to pay for a portion of the expenses to demonstrate good faith and reduce the perceived value of the gift. Option B. Accept the vacation and then disclose the gift to their manager and the compliance department after the trip has concluded. Option C. Accept the vacation, as it is a gesture of appreciation from a valued supplier and common practice in the industry for fostering strong business relationships. Option D. Politely decline the offer, citing company policy and the need to avoid any appearance of impropriety, and suggest a more modest, company-approved form of appreciation if appropriate. Correct answer is D. Politely decline the offer, citing company policy and the need to avoid any appearance of impropriety, and suggest a more modest, company-approved form of appreciation if appropriate. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Performance Food Group employee because it requires navigating potential conflicts of interest and adhering to strict ethical guidelines regarding the acceptance of gifts and entertainment from suppliers. The core of the challenge lies in distinguishing between appropriate business courtesies and actions that could be perceived as influencing business decisions or violating company policy and regulatory expectations. Careful judgment is required to maintain the integrity of Performance Food Group's procurement processes and uphold its reputation. The correct approach involves politely declining the offer of a lavish vacation, clearly stating that it exceeds acceptable limits for business courtesies, as defined by Performance Food Group's internal policies and relevant industry standards. This approach upholds ethical principles by avoiding any appearance of impropriety or undue influence. It aligns with the regulatory framework that emphasizes transparency, fairness, and the prevention of bribery and corruption. By adhering to established gift policies, the employee demonstrates a commitment to acting in the best interest of Performance Food Group and its stakeholders, ensuring that supplier relationships are based on merit and value, not personal gain. An incorrect approach would be to accept the vacation, arguing that it is a common practice in the industry or that it is a thank you for past business. This fails to recognize that industry norms do not supersede explicit company policies or ethical obligations. Accepting such a gift creates a significant conflict of interest, potentially compromising objective decision-making and opening the door to accusations of favorability or even bribery, which could have severe regulatory and legal consequences for both the employee and Performance Food Group. Another incorrect approach would be to accept the vacation, but offer to pay for a portion of it. While this might seem like an attempt to mitigate the appearance of impropriety, it still falls short of the ethical standard. The core issue is the acceptance of a substantial personal benefit from a supplier, which can still create an obligation or the perception of one, regardless of partial payment. This approach does not fully address the conflict of interest and the potential for undue influence. A further incorrect approach would be to accept the vacation and then disclose it to management after the fact. Disclosure after acceptance does not rectify the ethical breach that has already occurred. The acceptance itself, without prior approval or adherence to policy, is the primary issue. Proactive adherence to policy and seeking guidance before accepting such offers is crucial for maintaining ethical conduct and preventing potential violations. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of Performance Food Group's code of conduct and gift policies, When faced with an offer that seems generous or potentially problematic, the employee should ask, does this offer create a conflict of interest? Does it violate company policy? Could it be perceived as influencing a business decision? If there is any doubt, the professional course of action is to err on the side of caution. Politely decline the offer and consult with their manager or the compliance department for clarification and guidance. Transparency and adherence to established ethical frameworks are paramount. Question 16. Benchmark analysis indicates that a Performance Food Group employee has received an anonymous tip suggesting a key supplier may be engaging in fraudulent invoicing practices. The employee is concerned about the potential financial impact on Performance Food Group and is considering how to best address this information. Which of the following actions represents the most appropriate and professionally responsible first step for the Performance Food Group employee? Option A. Report the anonymous tip and all supporting details to the Performance Food Group's internal audit or compliance department. Option B. Ignore the anonymous tip, assuming it is unsubstantiated and not worth pursuing. Option C. Discuss the anonymous tip with other Performance Food Group employees in different departments to gather their opinions. Option D. Immediately contact the supplier directly to question them about the alleged fraudulent invoicing. Correct answer is D. Immediately contact the supplier directly to question them about the alleged fraudulent invoicing. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Performance Food Group employee because it requires navigating potential conflicts of interest and ensuring adherence to ethical standards and company policy, particularly concerning the acquisition of sensitive information. The employee must exercise sound judgment to avoid any perception or reality of impropriety. The correct approach involves prioritizing the company's established internal reporting and investigation protocols. This is the most professionally sound method because it ensures that any potential misconduct is handled through the appropriate channels, maintaining fairness, objectivity, and compliance with internal controls designed to protect Performance Food Group. This aligns with general principles of corporate governance and ethical conduct, which mandate that employees report suspected wrongdoing through designated procedures rather than engaging in independent, potentially unauthorized, investigations. An incorrect approach would be to directly confront the supplier without prior authorization or consultation with management. This bypasses established internal procedures and could lead to premature accusations, damage business relationships, or even compromise a formal investigation by alerting the suspected party. It also risks violating company policy regarding how such matters should be handled. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the information and take no action. This is professionally unacceptable as it demonstrates a lack of diligence and a failure to uphold ethical responsibilities to Performance Food Group. It could allow potential misconduct to continue unchecked, potentially harming the company. A further incorrect approach would be to share the information with colleagues outside of the designated reporting structure. This constitutes a breach of confidentiality and could lead to the spread of unsubstantiated rumors, damage reputations, and undermine any formal investigation process. It also risks violating data privacy and company information security policies. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the nature of the concern, assessing its potential impact, and then consulting relevant company policies and procedures. If a policy exists for handling such matters, it should be followed meticulously. If ambiguity exists, seeking guidance from a supervisor or the compliance department is paramount. The guiding principle is to act with integrity, transparency, within the bounds of policy, and in a manner that protects the interests of Performance Food Group. Question 17. The investigation demonstrates that a Performance Food Group employee is responsible for evaluating vendor proposals for a new distribution contract. The employee discovers that one of the highly competitive proposals comes from a company owned by a close personal friend. The employee believes this friend's company is the best fit for Performance Food Group's needs. What is the most appropriate course of action for the Performance Food Group employee in this situation? Option A. Disclose the personal relationship to their supervisor and recuse themselves from the final decision-making process regarding this vendor. Option B. Subtly advocate for the friend's proposal during internal discussions, highlighting its strengths without explicitly mentioning the personal connection. Option C. Proceed with the evaluation and decision as usual, believing their professional judgment will not be compromised by the personal friendship. Option D. Award the contract to the friend's company, assuming their proposal is genuinely the strongest, and not mention the friendship to anyone. The correct answer is A. Disclose the personal relationship to their supervisor and recuse themselves from the final decision-making process regarding this vendor. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a performance food group employee because it requires navigating potential conflicts of interest and ensuring compliance with internal policies and ethical standards, even when faced with personal relationships. The core of the challenge lies in maintaining objectivity and fairness in decision-making processes that could impact both the company and individuals known to the employee. Careful judgment is required to uphold the integrity of Performance Food Group's operations and its commitment to ethical conduct. The correct approach involves a transparent disclosure of the personal relationship to a supervisor or designated compliance officer. This allows for an objective review of the situation and the implementation of appropriate safeguards, such as recusal from decision-making processes or the assignment of the task to another individual. This approach is ethically sound and aligns with best practices in corporate governance, as it prioritizes the company's interest over personal relationships and prevents even the appearance of impropriety. It directly addresses potential conflicts of interest by bringing them to light and allowing for management of the risk. An incorrect approach of proceeding with the decision without disclosure fails to acknowledge the potential for bias, even if unintentional. This can lead to perceptions of favoritism, undermining trust within the organization and potentially violating Performance Food Group's code of conduct or ethics policies. It also exposes the company to reputational damage and potential legal or regulatory scrutiny if the decision is later found to be influenced by the personal relationship. Another incorrect approach of attempting to subtly influence the decision in favor of the acquaintance, even without explicit disclosure, is a direct ethical breach. This constitutes a misuse of professional position for personal gain or to benefit a third party, which is a violation of fiduciary duties and Performance Food Group's ethical standards. Such actions erode the foundation of trust and fairness essential for a healthy work environment. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a proactive assessment of any personal relationships that could intersect with professional responsibilities. When such a potential conflict arises, the immediate step should be to consult the company's conflict of interest policy and report the situation to the appropriate authority. This ensures that decisions are made in the best interest of Performance Food Group, maintaining transparency, fairness, and ethical integrity. Question 18. The analysis reveals that a key client of Performance Food Group has inquired about potential upcoming strategic initiatives that could impact the company's stock performance. The client is seeking any insights or indications that might inform their investment decisions. Option A. Politely inform the client that while Performance Food Group values their business, any information regarding strategic initiatives is strictly confidential until officially announced through public channels, and direct them to the company's investor relations website for official updates. Option B. Suggest that the client monitor industry news and analyst reports, as these often provide early indications of company direction, implying that such information might be more readily available elsewhere. Option C. Provide the client with a general overview of the types of strategic areas Performance Food Group is exploring, without disclosing any specific details or timelines, to demonstrate responsiveness. Option D. Share a few nonspecific positive anecdotes about recent internal discussions regarding growth opportunities, framing them as general optimism rather than concrete plans. The correct answer is A. Politely inform the client that while Performance Food Group values their business, any information regarding strategic initiatives is strictly confidential until officially announced through public channels, and direct them to the company's investor relations website for official updates. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Performance Food Group employee due to the inherent conflict between maintaining client relationships and adhering to strict compliance regulations. The need for careful judgment arises from balancing the desire to be helpful and responsive to a key client with the absolute requirement to avoid any actions that could be construed as offering preferential treatment or non-public information. The regulatory framework for financial services, particularly concerning insider trading and fair dealing, mandates that all clients be treated equitably and that no individual or entity gains an unfair advantage. The correct approach involves a commitment to transparency and adherence to established protocols. This means acknowledging the client's inquiry without providing any specific, non-public information about Performance Food Group's upcoming strategic decisions. Instead, the employee should direct the client to publicly available information or official company communications channels. This approach upholds the principles of fair disclosure and prevents any potential violations of regulations designed to maintain market integrity and prevent insider trading. It ensures that all market participants have access to the same information simultaneously, thereby fostering a level playing field. An incorrect approach that involves hinting at or disclosing any non-public information, even in a general sense, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This could be interpreted as providing preferential treatment, potentially influencing the client's investment decisions based on privileged information, and violating rules against insider trading. Such actions undermine market confidence and can lead to severe penalties for both the individual and the firm. Another incorrect approach, such as outright ignoring the client's inquiry without explanation, while not directly violating disclosure rules, demonstrates poor client relationship management and a lack of professionalism, potentially damaging the company's reputation and future business prospects. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance and ethical conduct above all else. This involves understanding the specific regulations applicable to their role and industry, recognizing potential conflicts of interest, and having a clear protocol for handling sensitive inquiries. When in doubt, seeking guidance from compliance departments or legal counsel is paramount. The guiding principle should always be to act in a manner that is transparent, fair, and in strict accordance with all applicable laws and company policies. Question 19. The performance metrics show a slight but consistent increase in temperature deviations within the refrigeration units at several Performance Food Group distribution centers over the past quarter. What is the most appropriate immediate action for the quality assurance manager to take to ensure regulatory compliance? Option A. Initiate a thorough investigation into the cause of the temperature deviations, including equipment checks, calibration records, and staff training logs, and document all findings and corrective actions. Option B. Focus solely on the overall delivery timeliness metrics, assuming the temperature deviations are minor and unlikely to impact food safety significantly. Option C. Instruct distribution center managers to manually log temperatures more frequently to compensate for any potential sensor inaccuracies. Option D. Temporarily adjust the acceptable temperature range in the reporting system to align with the observed deviations, pending a full equipment review. The correct answer is A. Initiate a thorough investigation into the cause of the temperature deviations, including equipment checks, calibration records, and staff training logs, and document all findings and corrective actions. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in regulatory compliance within the food service industry, specifically concerning adherence to food safety standards and reporting requirements. The professional challenge lies in balancing operational efficiency with the absolute necessity of maintaining compliance, especially when performance metrics might suggest a deviation from established protocols. It requires careful judgment to identify potential risks and implement corrective actions without compromising safety or regulatory standing. The correct approach involves a proactive and thorough investigation into the root cause of any identified performance metric deviations that could indicate a compliance issue. This means not just acknowledging the metrics, but actively seeking to understand why they are occurring and whether they point to a breach of regulations. This approach is correct because it prioritizes patient safety and regulatory adherence, which are paramount in the food service industry. Specifically, it aligns with the principles of hazard analysis and critical control points, HACP, and general food safety regulations that mandate continuous monitoring and corrective actions to prevent foodborne illnesses. By investigating and addressing the underlying issues, the company demonstrates a commitment to compliance and risk mitigation. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the performance metrics as minor operational fluctuations without investigating their potential link to compliance. This is a failure because it ignores potential risks to public health and could lead to significant regulatory penalties, reputational damage, and, most importantly, harm to consumers. Another incorrect approach would be to implement superficial fixes that do not address the root cause of the performance metric deviation. This is also a failure as it creates a false sense of security while the underlying compliance issue persists, leaving the company vulnerable to future violations. Finally, an approach that involves concealing or downplaying the significance of the performance metrics to avoid scrutiny is a severe ethical and regulatory failure, potentially constituting fraud and leading to severe legal consequences. Professionals in this field should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of all applicable regulations and internal policies. When performance metrics indicate a potential issue, the first step is always to investigate thoroughly, gathering all relevant data. This investigation should be followed by a risk assessment to determine the potential impact of the deviation on safety and compliance. Based on this assessment, appropriate corrective actions should be identified and implemented, with a clear plan for monitoring their effectiveness. Transparency and documentation throughout this process are crucial for demonstrating due diligence and maintaining accountability. Question 20. To address the challenge of protecting sensitive customer data during routine business interactions at Performance Food Group, an employee receives a request via email from an address that appears to be associated with a regular business contact. The email asks for specific account details that could be considered confidential. Which of the following actions best demonstrates adherence to regulatory compliance and ethical data handling practices? Option A. Share the information with the sender, but only after cross-referencing it with publicly available information to ensure its accuracy. Option B. Forward the email to the IT security department for verification and await their confirmation before responding to the requester. Option C. Immediately provide the requested information as the email address appears legitimate and the request seems reasonable for business operations. Option D. Respond to the email requesting the sender to call a specific company-verified phone number to verbally confirm their identity and the request. The correct answer is C. Immediately provide the requested information as the email address appears legitimate and the request seems reasonable for business operations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge for Performance Food Group employees regarding the appropriate handling of sensitive customer information. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for efficient business operations and customer service with the stringent requirements of data privacy regulations. Employees must exercise careful judgment to avoid unauthorized disclosure or misuse of information, which could lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. The pressure to provide quick service can sometimes create a temptation to take shortcuts, making adherence to policy crucial. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves strictly adhering to Performance Food Group's established data privacy policies and relevant regulations, such as the California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA, if applicable to the customer's location and the nature of the data. This means verifying the identity of the requester through approved channels and only disclosing information that is explicitly permitted by policy and law. This approach is correct because it prioritizes data security and customer privacy, which are fundamental ethical and legal obligations. Regulatory frameworks mandate that companies protect personal information and ensure it is only accessed and shared by authorized individuals for legitimate business purposes. By following established protocols, employees act as responsible stewards of customer data, mitigating risks of breaches and noncompliance. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that involves sharing customer information based on a verbal request from someone claiming to be a representative of the customer, without independent verification, is incorrect. This fails to meet the Know Your Customer principles and regulatory requirements for data protection. It creates a significant risk of unauthorized access and disclosure, violating privacy laws and company policy. Another incorrect approach would be to assume that because a request comes from a known contact or a seemingly legitimate email address, it is automatically authorized. This bypasses necessary security checks and leaves the company vulnerable to social engineering attacks or accidental data leaks. It demonstrates a lack of diligence in safeguarding sensitive information. Finally, an approach that involves sharing information because it seems helpful or expedient without consulting company policy or seeking clarification is also incorrect. This prioritizes convenience over compliance and ethical responsibility. It can lead to unintentional violations of data privacy laws and expose Performance Food Group to legal repercussions. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Performance Food Group should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes compliance and security. This involves 1. Understanding and internalizing company policies on data privacy and customer information handling. 2. Familiarizing oneself with applicable data privacy regulations relevant to their operations and customer base. 3. Always verifying the identity of the requester through established, secure channels before disclosing any information. 4. Consulting company policy or a supervisor when in doubt about the appropriateness of a request. 5. Recognizing that expediency should never override security and compliance. 6. Documenting requests and disclosures as per company procedures.